Creating the world of Harry Potter wasn't easy, and there were a whole lot of people involved in bringing it to our screens. Why did Daniel Radcliffe decide to produce a film about his stunt double?
It is unfair. He shouldn't have had to do any of that.
What was the scariest scene for Rupert Grint to film? And why did creating Voldemort's nose resemble a Renaissance painting to the CGI crew?
You put your faith in me.
The most dangerous job. No, it's not an horror. In the Muggle world, being a stunt double is one of the hardest and most hazardous jobs ever. One incident in particular is proof of that. For a scene in The Deathly Hallows Part 1, Daniel Radcliffe was replaced by a stunt double, David Holmes. Suddenly, an explosion, which was part of a planned stunt, sent David plummeting to the ground. The fall left him with a serious spinal injury and permanent paralysis from the chest down. The accident was a huge shock for everyone. After all, David had worked on the set as Daniel's stunt double for 10 years.
Dave just seemed like a cool older brother. He would do the most dangerous physical stuff.
The Harry Potter star has a great deal of respect for him, and he was there to support Dave on his recovery journey. Even after all these years, the two have remained friends. And recently, Daniel was an executive producer on the documentary David Holmes, The Boy Who Lived, on HBO, that tells more about him. But the Harry Potter cast didn't always want to rely on stunt doubles. Sometimes they'd do the less dangerous scenes themselves. For example, Tom Felton partly did his stunts in the explosive fiend fire scene.
Spells fly left, right, and center. Crab can't quite control himself.
All the actor had to do was climb up a pile of furniture and then fall down, grabbing onto the table. Doesn't sound like a big deal, or does it?
But all of the furniture was shaky and wobbly while they were climbing, but of course was completely safe.
You're right, does it high?
It took quite a lot of time to film this sequence and get it right. But in the end, Tom and everyone else was happy with the result.
It's brilliantly shot, so it looks natural. Of all the years here, that was the most terrifying stunt.
The entire cast and crew of Harry Potter definitely appreciated their stunt doubles. They did an amazing job, but so did the visual effects team. Behind the magical creatures. The Harry Potter series is full of these, but each one of them needed elaborate work. For example, for Buckbeak the Hippogriff, 3 versions were made: standing, rearing, and lying down. The CGI team created every single feather in each version after consulting vets to ensure that they looked accurate. The Basilisk was another realistic creation. They made a detailed life-sized model of the beast based on J.K. Rowling's description. Combining practical and visual effects, it could move and slither, terrifying the actors.
When Dan is fighting on top of the stone head, he was actually fighting a mechanical version of that snake at times. And that was very intimidating because the thing weighs hundreds of pounds.
Pretty amazing, right? Even more amazing is that this giant serpent was voiced by Jason Isaacs. But the Basilisk wasn't the only terrifying creature in the Chamber of Secrets. There was also Aragog, the giant spider and friend of Hagrid's. And he was quite complex as well.
And it's got these amazing pincers things. It's really creepy.
Looks like Dan was pretty excited about this creature, unlike Rupert.
I didn't know really what to expect, but when I saw Aragog, it was really scary because it was massive.
Yep, just like Ron, Rupert is afraid of spiders in real life. So kudos to him for making it through this scene. Now let's talk about more innocent creatures, the house elves. Dobby was wholly digitalized in the Chamber of Secrets and voiced by Toby Jones. But in the Deathly Hallows, actress Diane Gibbons wore bald caps and prosthetics to portray the elf. And Toby Jones once again provided Dobby's voice. I bet you didn't know that creating the character of Hagrid took some effort too. After all, let's not forget that he was half giant. Robbie Coltrane had a body double, Martin Bayfield, who was over 6 feet tall. Bayfield replaced him in many scenes, wearing a mask to resemble Hagrid. Plus, some visual tricks were used. For the inside of Hagrid's hut, they had 2 versions. One was larger to make the others look smaller, and the other was tiny to make Coltrane appear gigantic. And how did they create the main villain of the series? When a nose takes too much work, isn't it incredible how they transformed the good-looking Ralph Fiennes into the snake-faced Dark Lord? It was all thanks to the makeup team. They practiced a lot before actually working on Rafe, and they managed to cut his time in the makeup chair to only 2 hours. Yeah, it could have been much more. They used eyebrow blockers, temporary tattoos, as well as fake teeth and nails to turn Fiennes into a monster. They were so successful that he frightened children on the set.
Anyway, I passed by this little child. I just looked at this boy. He had burst into tears.
Let's not forget about that infamous nose. Makeup couldn't do it justice, so they used visual effects. In every shot Fiennes was in, the CGI team would edit out his nose and add snake-like slits. According to the visual effects supervisor, Paul Franklin, it was incredibly hard. It's very laborious, very time-consuming, and the level of detail is exquisite, he said. He added that, for the crew, it was similar to creating a Renaissance painting. After all, the digital brushwork had to be very delicate to make it look exactly right. Bet you never expected that erasing a nose could be so difficult. Yet, of course, the CGI team had other challenges too. All about Quidditch. Every Harry Potter movie has a flying broomstick scene. Whether it's Quidditch, the Triwizard Tournament, or wizards escaping from Death Eaters, it always looks epic. To film it all, various methods were used. One involved jumping on a trampoline in front of a green screen. Rupert Grint recalls the experience as quite a frightening one. You go about 30 feet in the air. I was holding a broom and they were throwing balls at me. It's quite scary. In another technique, they placed a broomstick on a robot on a tall rig. As actors sat on the broom, the robot would move beneath them. It was all done in front of a green screen with added artificial wind to create the illusion of flying. Needless to say, it was a complicated process.
It was on like a seesaw, where you have one guy at one end with a load of weights and he's holding it, and then you at the other end with a bicycle seat, and he can sort of move you about and you're at his disposal.
And a lot of the time, the actors were filmed separately.
Using motion control cameras, incorporate them into the background.
Filming one scene of flying took hours as they needed multiple angles. I'm sure sitting on a broomstick for that long got really tiring at some point. But no one complained because they loved their job so much. Just like the entire crew who created The Reality of Hogwarts. The most magical school actually had some real-life elements. It was filmed around various places in Great Britain. However, finding a beautiful location wasn't enough because Hogwarts was no ordinary castle. Magic had to be created on set or with special effects. The portraits were a mix of real paintings and a green screen. And then, moving images were added in post-production. To create the staircases that change by themselves, they used a real staircase and multiple tiny models of others. While actors stood on one staircase, the models moved around, creating the magical view later enhanced by the visual effects team. In some scenes, the crew even used green gloves. For example, in The Half-Blood Prince, people wore them to place books onto shelves as Emma Watson pretended to just let them fly there. Obviously, the gloves were removed in post-production, but there was at least one magical thing in Hogwarts that was pretty much real without CGI. It was those candles floating in the air in the Great Hall. In the first film, they actually hung the candles on wires, but it wasn't exactly practical. The heat burned through the wires, causing candles to fall down on the tables, right onto the food. Yuck. So in later movies, they just added them digitally. And now, it's time to talk about the epic stuff. The Battle of Hogwarts. We've already talked about how the Malfoy actor performed his own stunts in the Fiend Fire sequence, but there were many more memorable scenes in the final film. For example, you must remember the scene where Ron and Hermione destroyed the Horcrux with a Basilisk tooth in the Chamber of Secrets. Moments after, they were completely soaked. The scene looked dreadful with visual effects, but on set, it was rather different. Filmed in front of a green screen, Emma and Rupert just got a huge bucket of water poured on them. Hope it was warm at least. Shooting the battle itself also took immense effort. For example, during Harry and Voldemort's final duel, the actors were surrounded by mats. After all, they had to fall a lot. But Dan still needed his stunt double to replace him at certain points when it was more dangerous.
What's the scariest part? It was scary.
And how did they film the destruction of Hogwarts? The visual effects team created a CG-rendered version of the castle that was incredibly detailed. It even had profiles of the handrails on the staircases leading up to Dumbledore's tower. Not one single element was left out as the team strove to make it look as realistic as possible. But here's the thing. They had to film several takes of the destruction of Hogwarts, so it was necessary to build multiple versions of the model and then destroy them all one by one. But seeing the final result, it was definitely worth the effort. Which Harry Potter film do you think had the most fabulous visual effects? Share in the comments below, and then watch our other videos on the Potterverse and its cast.